Well, hello again. It's Steve Barber here. Still trying to learn how to post up videos to my YouTube channel. I've gotten some recent instruction on how to do that and hoping for the best. This time I thought I would attempt to build a bit of a longer video to give that a try. The others were just a few minutes. I'm going to try and upload a few minutes longer than the ones previously. So I thought what I would do in this video is give a bit of history about how this approach to this collaborative approach to negotiations, decision-making, and organizational effectiveness came to be initially introduced to the public sector in general and to public education in particular, because I think it was an initial effort to put it into public education in California, that is, first, and then it found its way out into the realm of the other aspects of the public sector. It goes back to the era of the 70s when the Educational Employment Relations Act was passed to bring formalized collective bargaining to public education. There's a history behind that. I was a staff person to one of the members of the assembly at the time. I won't go into that because it's kind of the kind of thing where you don't kiss and tell. A lot of details about that whole thing, and I probably need to make a complete video about that. But I found myself eventually working for a man named John Garamendi, who is still active in politics. And while I was working for him, I was, what should I say, poached, recruited to go to work for the first iteration of Jerry Brown's administration, and I went to work for a man named Mario Obledo, who was the Health and Welfare Agency Secretary at that time. I worked for him as what you might call a fixer, a person who was called into his office when there were issues that needed to be dealt with inside the agency, the Health and Welfare Agency. And one of those was putting together the logistics and hiring and administrative rules for this soon-to-be open board, the Public Employment, what's now called the Public Employment Relations Board, but at the time it was called the Educational Employment Relations Board. Well, unbeknownst to me, without giving it a name, a member of the board who happened to also be one of my former employers, Ray Gonzalez, and I kind of influenced the design of the process that we would use to write the administrative procedures regulations for PERB. And later on, unbeknownst to me, that could have been given a name, which was interest-based approach. It gave agency to all parties involved in the writing of those rules so that we had virtually no opposition to those rules when they were adopted and submitted to the Administrative Procedures, Office of Administrative Procedures. Anyway, that's not really what prompted the introduction of the formal processes and principles and given them a name later. The promise of that statute was, the Educational Employment Relations Act, was that it might reduce, the hope was from the legislators, especially the ones who voted for it, was that it would reduce conflict in public schools so that the legislature wasn't having to have a huge caseload of its own every year trying to resolve employment problems at the local level. So one of the obligations was to write and submit to the legislature annual reports and then a 10-year annual report. Well, when that 10-year annual report deadline came around, it was my assignment as the then executive director or deputy executive director of PERB to write that report. And I did a content analysis of all of the cases, decisions that the board had rendered. And what I realized after going through all of that was that it seemed like instead of the 80-20 rule, it was the 94-6. 94% of the caseload seemed to be coming from about only 6% of the constituency that was covered by this law. And worse than that, if you really took a deep dive into who the parties were, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way whatsoever, what I found, in my own opinion and that of my colleagues, was that much of the conflict that was brought to the agency in the form of unfair practice charges was stimulated more by parties and individuals who were using the statute to sustain and make conflict, so that the message that they were having was that, and my opinion is that was coming from both sides of the equation, was that we can do a better job of running the school district than you can. And so they were also using the statute. By the way, I've got clouds outside, so it just got a little darker. To really disrespect and injure the other party. Now, it costs a lot of money to file a case at PERB and ERB before it became PERB. So in writing that 10-year report, I had to obviously get approval from my board at the time. And I had to say, look, conflict has become formalized and ritualized, which was the intention of the act. But this 94-6 situation and the content analysis of the cases seemed to indicate that it was dysfunctional relationships at the local level that were stimulating the cases. And the reduction of conflict as intended by the statute did not seem to be the case. It seemed to be the acceleration of it, or at least a new arena for dysfunctional relationships to act out toward each other. Of course, the board didn't hear that, but I was responsible for writing the report. The statistics themselves did not look good. My take on it was not necessarily something that would go into the report, but I can't remember if it did. But a couple of the board members were like, horrors, we can't tell the legislature that conflict has gone up over the period of time that we've been in place. We need to show that it's gone down. Well, yeah, we could show that it went up, but theoretically everybody was telling us and the legislature that that jump in conflict in the first few years would start to diminish over the following years, but that was not the case. So they authorized me to take a jump through a window. The window opened about that much, and do what I could to look into this business of what everybody was calling at the time win-win negotiations. Now, I need to give a little background on that, because for the better part of 10 years before we wrote that 10-year report, my background in political science was not a background in labor law or the practice of labor law. And what I kept asking all the lawyers and other constituents of the agency, lawyers for the agency and constituents, why is it that the only negotiations model that seems to be practiced out there and was put into the law itself, regulated as the only model, if you will, is the classic Contract 1 taught in law school, which is basically offer and acceptance, which is a transactional methodology of doing contract negotiations, offer and acceptance. Educators, or I should say academicians, in negotiations process would certainly not call it integrative negotiations. So I had been lobbying my colleagues on the board for a better part of 10 years that we need to take a look at another model and encourage people to give it a try. It would not be in conflict with the law because the critical portions of the law with regard especially to sunshining to the public and everything would remain intact. We didn't have to change the law at all. We just needed to help people understand there might be other methods of negotiation which honor the law itself, but also especially reduce and get people to reflect on the fact that in negotiations, if you're going to have a healthy negotiations relationship, especially in relationships that cannot get a divorce, you want to look for another model that's not as transactional as the one that was ossified in the statute and seemed to be practiced by everybody. So I took that opportunity to have, as an open invitation, which it was, especially from a board member, Stephen Parker at the time, who encouraged me to do this, to really put the screws to, we need to make sure that when we introduce the 10-year annual report to the legislature, we need to give them reassurance that we were looking for means by which this spike and continued growth in the case law could eventually be reduced. So I'm going to leave it at that and hope I remember where I left it the next time I take up, because now I've got a 13-minute video that I want to see will upload to my channel on YouTube.